very exciting panel, something that's different, a panel that we've never touched upon in the past. We have a great moderator and 3 great panelists, so they'll come up to the stage, and while they're doing that, what we will have is a brief introduction by a person that many of you may know. As I was walking up, she said when I introduce her, make sure I get her title right, and she said what it was, and it was about 15 words long, so of course I don't remember it. So I'll just introduce her as my mentor and friend, Jane Builder.
I have to correct him. I didn't give him a long title, but it's a little different to absorb. I do government relations, for those who don't know me, but I do it for engineering and operations. If there is legislation that is presenting an obstacle to the infrastructure, then I'm all in. But if it's anything else, tax or consumer issues, that's for somebody else. So today's moderator, who I'm here to introduce, where'd she go? There, okay, is Leslie Snyder. She's the managing partner at Snyder & Snyder and head of the firm's real estate and commercial transactions group, including telecommunications. When I first met Leslie, it was north of a decade ago, and I, doing government relations, was new to wireless. I had asked the carrier representatives to come together to discuss opposition to an attempt by a particular council member to regulate and control the siting of rooftop wireless facilities. Guess where? New York City. That's a lot of rooftops that he wanted to control. On my end, I was the first female on the Northeast Regional Engineering and Operations team. I walked into the room where the meeting was, and it was all men. Maybe 1 or 2 are here today. And then in walked Leslie, smiling, confident, friendly, and I was stunned. I was really stunned. I hadn't seen a woman in the city on telecom matters at all. Over the years, and anyone who knows Leslie would agree, she is meticulous, thorough, and persistent when it comes to her clients' interests. Though we represent competitors, Leslie always reaches for common ground and is really good at finding it. Leslie is passionate about diversity and was recognized by City and State as one of 40 women working towards a fairer future. As women, we've all had our challenges, no matter how we define them. The hope is that we've paved the way for other women and contributed to a broader support for other individuals who feel marginalized. Leslie?
Thank you, Jane. It's wonderful to be introduced by such a wonderful woman, and our topic today is diversity and inclusion. These are words that have certainly become buzzwords in recent years. However, they're more than just a passing fad. They're vital elements to a business's success. A diverse, inclusive workforce brings the knowledge and experience of a broader cross-section of society and helps bring the telecom business closer to the people they serve. Today, I have 3 dynamic individuals with me with firsthand knowledge of what it's like to bring diversity to the workforce. The first panelist, which is all the way over to my right, is Marc Blakeman. Marc serves as AT&T's president of Mid-Atlantic states. In that capacity, he leads the company's government affairs, public policy, philanthropic, and social engagement initiatives across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Marc has had a 25-year career at AT&T. He has served as vice president of External Affairs for AT&T California and as Regional Vice President of External Affairs in Illinois. He joined AT&T's predecessor, Ameritech, in 1997 after serving in various positions in Illinois state government. He currently serves as the chair of the Employee Engagement Committee of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force at AT&T. Next to Marc is Karmen Rajamani. She is Vice President of Government Affairs for Crown Castle and joined in 2013. Her team is responsible for working with state and local municipalities nationwide, creating legislative and regulatory processes that propel tower and network deployments at scale and in a cost-effective manner. Karmen has worked in telecommunications industry for over 20 years, with a focus on land use, zoning, permitting, utilities, building teams, and community outreach. And directly next to me is HaDisha Gordon. HaDisha Gordon is Corporation Counsel for the Northeast region at Dish Wireless. HaDisha has significant experience in telecommunications, land use, zoning, and real estate law. As in-house counsel, HaDisha currently works to support Dish in its commitment to build America's first smart network from the ground up. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the initiatives of these three companies regarding diversity. But before we get into that, I would ask each of them to tell us a little bit about their current role and how they got to their current role and how they've seen their role expand in relation to bringing diversity to the workplace. So I'd ask Marc if you could go into your role and AT&T's roles.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much, Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I start, I want to give a shout out to Amy Heinz-Kramer, who's our president of New York, who graciously asked me to be part of this today. So if you know Amy, she's a wonderful asset to our team. I've been with AT&T for 25 years. I joined Ameritech as one of the predecessor companies of the current AT&T. And right now I'm working on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for our company, for our business unit. And one of the things I think has been key for me, diversity has been part of AT&T, it's part of our DNA. We've had employee resource groups for decades. We've been really good on the diversity part. It's the inclusion and equity part that I think that we've really been focused on the last couple of years. And so we created this task force to do two things. One, create an environment internally in the company where diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations are more normalized, so people don't feel anxious around those types of conversations, particularly around race. And also, how do we continue to reflect the communities that we serve? And I think one of the key findings that we found recently is that although we have a good track record with diversity and that our workforce has always mirrored the communities we served at every level, as this has become a much more prevalent issue in a lot of companies around the country, we found that our ranks are being dipped into by other companies, and our bench wasn't that strong. So what we're finding as other companies are awakening to the importance of diversity, they're coming to our company and taking employees away, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything to continue to build our bench so that we have a very diverse pipeline. And we can talk later about some of those initiatives, but those are some of the things that we've been working on at AT&T.
Karmen?
So let's see, I've been with Crown, I think that this is my 9th year. Before that, we were hearing from Patrick earlier about fixed wireless, that I started the industry at a fixed wireless firm, so it comes full circle. And before that, I've been most of my career with telecom companies, but with large tower companies. So before that, I worked at American Tower for 12 years. Crown has experienced a similar thing to AT&T, that we've been really focused on our diversity and inclusion challenges and identifying those, because frankly, you can't solve something until you know what the issue is. So Crown has always been known for its really exemplary employee culture. We're really focused on our employees, but we started to look more closely on our diversity and inclusion efforts and what we needed to do to increase those. And so in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of programs where we started with our leadership, our people leaders, and looked at where we could help to increase our diversity. And so we could talk about our different initiatives later, but we've been really focused on that and making sure that we have more folks who we are looking at as we have openings, and then for our teammates that are with us to make sure that we are inclusive and making sure that we are looking at everyone in a more holistic way as opposed to just experience when we're looking for promotions and advancement.
Okay, so I'm HaDisha Gordon, again, Corporate Counsel, Northeast Region at Dish Wireless. Dish is in a relatively, I guess I would say, new position in launching its DE&I efforts because Dish Wireless is new. The network is more established, but the wireless industry is kind of carving out its own way right now in its DE&I efforts, which is great for all the newcomers like myself that come along, and we have a real opportunity to kind of dive headfirst into what these initiatives are. But we do have employee resource groups and things like that that we are, that I am a part of personally, and a lot of people on our wireless side are a part of. I've also been in the industry 8 years now, so my entire legal career I've been in the wireless telecom industry. And just kind of by way of my personal experience in getting into the industry, it was introduction by a gentleman that I met in the 5th grade who was my boss when I was outside counsel for the carriers. He introduced me to the wireless industry and offered me a job right out of law school and was like, hey, how would you like to represent carriers? And I'm like, I don't know, but I also don't have a job, so I guess I'll find out. So that was my introduction into the wireless industry. And then segue into here now at Dish, a young woman, white woman by the name of Nancy. And I mentioned that because I think an important part of D&I efforts is one, introducing people, which my former mentor and boss did for me, introduced me into an industry that I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge of. And then 2, Nancy, in my current position, I worked with her while I was outside counsel. She's also an attorney at Dish now. She introduced my name into a conversation of, we need some more attorneys and who could help us here? And she was sure to mention me, which is also something else I think, just by way of personal experience, is another important part of DE&I efforts, which is mentioning someone's name in a room full of opportunity. And not to say that Dish wouldn't have found me, but I'm not sure, but for my LinkedIn page and Nancy mentioning my name in the room, they found me, and I am also a part of Dish's DE&I efforts. So.
Marc, maybe you can tell us about AT&T's pay equity system, because that's been, I know, a lot of topics, and it's been in the press very often, sure. And it's sort of a unique.
Yeah. So this was more of a result of decades of mergers and acquisitions. And as you can imagine, after many years of building the company up into what it became, there were a lot of disparate people from different companies, different backgrounds, all over the world. And recently our company took the initiative of looking at every single employee, basically starting from zero, and making sure that there was uniform job codes, job target salary ranges. And this was a huge initiative, and what it has happened is it has the effect of, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure that we have more equitable pay. It's probably not unusual, and if those of you that come from a Bell system company, you know, we're very level conscious. So, you know, when we would promote people, you would get a 10% raise. You got a 10% raise and you got bumped up a level, and that's, you know, basically how it worked. But also we were finding that if you started low to begin with, which typically happens a lot with women and people of color who have been taught not to push back when they are offered a job or a new salary, then you never got ahead. You were constantly behind because you got a 10% raise. And so 2 things happened. One, we readjusted everyone's salary in the company to be uniform. So that meant some people getting raises of tens of thousands of dollars, some people got $10, but to bring them up to a midpoint of a new target salary. But also, as we're looking at promoting, instead of promoting people from a position, we promote people to a position. So if you're applying for a director position in New York City for public affairs, that job pays this target salary range. And it doesn't matter what you were making before, it's what job you were going into. And that's made a world of difference, one for morale, for pay equity, and it really has created an environment where a lot of transparency around salaries, And again, not necessarily because of anything that had been done wrong. It was more of just all of these companies coming together with different types of pay structures and salary ranges. And that's been just one thing when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion that you can look at as your pay equity.
Karmen, I know Crown has very unique policies regarding hiring to make sure that they're encouraging diversity in hiring. Can you tell us some of those initiatives?
Yes. That as part of our diversity and inclusion, examination that we've been doing, that we've done a couple of things. So right now, it's probably for the last year, and it'll continue on for the rest of this year and probably next year, that every teammate at Crown is going through a diversity and inclusion training, and it's a whole series where we have it's with that purpose, as Marc mentioned, to make it more comfortable and routine for people to talk about these issues of diversity and inclusion. So that's one thing, and that's something I've gone through it, and my team has gone through it, and now we're going through individual contributors. We have a number of tools to help us get us started so that we get into the routine of it. But as I've been seeing, really, even in the last 6 months, that it has become, some of that awkwardness has shed. And so that, I think, shows that hopefully we're on the right path. Another initiative that Crown is taking is in our hiring. So as we've talked about with workforce development, we're hiring. Lots of companies in this room are hiring also. And as Marc mentioned, it is competitive. And so we want to make sure that we're not following into those same traps as perhaps in the past, and potentially erasing any positive progress that we've made. So it is it is part of our process where you're making sure that the candidate pool is diverse and it is inclusive. And so where we don't want to fall into those thoughts of, well, I know this person and they have a great experience and that sort of thing. That's all very good. But who else? Who else is looking for an opportunity? Who else within our company as a whole is looking for an opportunity, is ready for the next thing? And so we're really being very mindful about making sure that the pool, the candidate pool and the finalist pool is much broader than it had been in the past.
HaDisha, I loved your example about women promoting other women and the other people that have promoted you along the way. Now that you're growing a new company at Dish, do you see what things you've been doing yourself or others that have been continuing to encourage that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes a long way with kind of just exactly what I said earlier, introducing people to the field that may not be otherwise familiar with it. So one of the things that I know Dish is in early discussions with, they're talking about and trying to figure out how to formulate the relationship is with HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, which I am a graduate of a historically black college and university myself, partnering with HBCUs to kind of introduce a streamline or a pipeline rather of African American students getting into tech industries and wireless industries, which are fields that otherwise we may not have been familiar with or introduced to. So things like that is kind of introducing people to a field that they're not normally a part of, and then speaking people's names in rooms of opportunity and just saying, hey, I know someone that would be great for this. And just to Karmen's point, not just, oh, I know someone who would be great for this and they're my friend or I worked with them before, which are all great things, but also they have something different that I know that they could offer to this room. They have a different perspective, they have a different expertise, and I think that they would really be a value add to this company, to the work that we're doing, and just standing up and just kind of showing up for people in that way.
Well, I know telecom, we're always trying to cater to people where they live, where they work, where they play. So I think that all sort of ties into having a diverse workforce. Marc, I know you had mentioned that there's different groups at AT&T. I think there were even 501Cs, you said. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could explain that, because I thought that was very fascinating. I haven't heard of that before.
Sure.
About what a large company has done as an initiative to create a diverse workplace.
Yeah, many of you may have, especially if you work for larger companies, have heard of the term of employee resource groups, and AT&T has had those for, as I said, for several decades. We have about 20 of them now, and it's really a way for our employees to gather together around a common interest, and that could be, we've got one for our gay and lesbian employees, for the women of AT&T, or Hispanic, or Indian and Asian American. We have one for intergenerational issues. We have one for veterans. But one of the things, and again, because they've been around so long, at AT&T, they are all actually their own standalone 501c3 nonprofit corporations. So they're not affiliated directly with the company. They consist of our employees of our company, but they do their own fundraising, they do their own activities without the sanction of AT&T. We do support them financially, but a lot of their funding now comes on their own, from their own devices, of their own fundraising activities. And having that kind of separation has been, I think, really good for morale. It's really good for building a sense of community. And there isn't necessarily the involvement of the company dictating what issues that they talk about. And it allows them to come to our leadership with real issues that they can that our company needs to address, and again, do it so with some autonomy. I think we may be unique in that they're all 501c3s, but it's worked very well for our company.
Karmen, I know that Crown has a very unique program dealing with diverse suppliers. There's a lot of suppliers out here of different products. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your diverse supplier program and things that you are doing to encourage having a diverse supplier effort.
Yes. So, with these diversity and inclusion efforts, they are, the right thing to do, but they're also the thing that our customers and their customers want. And so, part of this, if you're trying to convince your company or others on why to do this, is because it's also good for business. And so we are taking that attitude with our suppliers. So since I'm in government affairs, I hear with a lot of municipalities and have a lot of those conversations, and increasingly in municipalities, that is an issue. So talk to us about your workforce. It's great that you are hiring and training in my community. How many live within the city limits, of my perhaps more urban core city? How many folks are you training? You have these workforces. How many are you hiring from HBCs? We are also doing a similar program. So it's those, we are responding to the market, and so we want to be able to talk with our municipal partners, and I always want to say, yes, I am hiring people from your community. And so that has had my team and our others to go and say, look, with our supplier diversity, it's not only the best price and the best quality, but also your workforce. And so we are on a program where we are trying to hit milestones every year, and that number increases the percentage of diverse workforce. And we've been successful, but of course, that work is never done.
I know, HaDisha, you mentioned that DISH is going to historically Black colleges to encourage workforce. Is there anything else that you're promoting at DISH that you think would be worthwhile to other companies and other initiatives, since you're the younger one in the group, yeah. So you've got a nice, fresh perspective, which we really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, being a part of this panel made me start asking the questions and saying, hey, what are our initiatives here? Because I wanted to make sure I had some good answers for you guys, especially after hearing Marc on our prep call, and he was spewing out all the stuff AT&T was doing, and I was like, oh yeah, we have some heavy shoes that kind of follow behind. So I did hold DISH's feet to the fire a little bit. I'm like, hey, well, what are we doing here, and what are our efforts? And more importantly, I started reevaluating my role in those efforts. So joining and being a part of those employee resource groups, and being a part of now the discussion and conversation of how we foster the relationship between HBCUs, especially, like I said, being an HBCU grad myself. So being a part of those things, and then more importantly, having the discussions on my level and the levels much higher up than me about how do we make this initiative a part of a core business plan, not just oh, we need to hire and have more diverse people, but how do we make sure that when we get diverse groups of people and populations, how do we retain those groups? How do we make sure that they're paid equally, as Marc mentioned? How do we make sure that they're promoted equally? And stakeholders in this business and this company. So those are discussions that I've started to have in the few weeks leading up to here, and am very excited about continuing the discussions, because I did learn that we do have a team of people that were hired by Dish Wireless specifically to do DE&I efforts. So we have an executive who's running and heading up the program. And I want to help her in her role and say, hey, are you being funded properly to do this stuff? Because that's also an important part of it, not just having an initiative, but saying that we're going to put the resources behind it, the people, the funds, and everything. So it's not just a program, but it's really the core of the business. And that's what I'm learning more about now, and hopefully we'll continue to learn more about, because it is something that I'm personally passionate about.
Marc, I know you mentioned that you've been at AT&T for 25 years. So out of all the initiatives that you've seen and all the things that I'm sure started, stopped, continued, which one do you think has been the most effective? And maybe you can give us some insights, if you're not as big as AT&T, what you would suggest are things that you could do.
Yeah, HaDisha joked about when I was spewing all of the programs. This is, I think, if there's anything I would stress with you is diversity, equity, inclusion is something that every company can do. It doesn't have to cost money. I don't care if you're 10 people or 10,000 people. This is something that you can make a commitment to. And I think some of the more recent initiatives that AT&T has undergone are things that aren't necessarily don't cost a lot of money, but make a huge impact. And HaDisha was talking too about finding historically black colleges and universities. One thing, and I'm sure you've all been in rooms where maybe you're hiring an engineer and somebody says, "Oh, we couldn't find a black engineer candidate," and that really just tells me then you didn't know where to look and that you didn't look hard enough. And I think having conversations not just about did you interview a diverse slate of candidates, but what did you do to get a diverse slate of candidates? And I think those are the types of questions that make people stop and think, okay, I'm not just looking at the color of people's skin or their gender, but looking at what efforts I'm taking to make sure that I have a diverse pool of candidates. And then I think the next step that has been very helpful, and I just hired a person in the last couple of months, and we use this too, is having hiring panels and making sure that you have diverse panels of people that are coming from different levels within the company, that are a different gender makeup or racial makeup, who are actually sitting in on the interview process and adding their experiences, their viewpoints, their point of view to the hiring process. And it's been really, really enlightening as the two people that we most recently hired being part of that process, and seeing how in one case we completely went a different direction and hired another candidate after having this diverse, after interviewing everyone, and this panel coming together and talking about their thoughts and what the team needed. And again, that costs no money, took a little bit of extra time and a little extra energy to have all those people involved. But a panel of 3 or 4 people to sit down and interview all of your candidates. And I think that makes sure that you have a diverse organization moving forward, a diverse in thought, diverse in gender makeup, diverse in socioeconomic makeup, and I think those ideas are that come from a diverse workforce really can benefit all organizations in the long run.
I know, Karmen, you mentioned that Crown has this program that you have to listen to. Mm-hmm. What type of discussions have you had with teams so that you could encourage diversity on maybe a more personal level, as opposed to just listening to
yes, or reading a book,
right, or something like that. Right? You can highlight. I know.
Yes. And so we have. So it is you there is a book that you read. Isn't there always? But there's Cliff Notes somewhere. So there's that. But it is really in the discussions. And so we do have trainers who are leading these discussions who are extremely dynamic. And frankly, as I was there and thought this is so useful, but as I was there, I thought, how am I possibly going to take this back to my team? I'm not, as dynamic and fearless as the person who's training us. So they did arm us with different talking points, and really the most impactful thing, at least for me, and as I have talked with other leaders for them as well, is to live it. And I know that seems, oh, how simple. But it is very hard, frankly. And I've had a couple of instances where something happens. There is some awkward moment, or frankly, I might have said something that was awkward and you're just in the past, oh, what do you do? What do you do is that you acknowledge it. Gosh, I put my foot in my mouth. You correct yourself. I am sorry. I won't do that again. And then you move on. It doesn't have to be this tortured thing. And so for people to see that and to have that example and that you see it consistently through the leaders in our company, that has truly been impactful, and it does help lessen the awkwardness of it, and that it happens routinely, not that we're all putting our foots in our mouth, or feet in your mouth, but that you are acknowledging it in a very upfront and direct but regular way that you would tell someone, could you please, shut the door as you come in because we're already started the meeting. It's very, seeing that it's a regular process is part of your workday, I think has been very helpful.
If I could add on to that, Leslie, I think one thing that's been really interesting at AT&T is we haven't really been, in our latest round of training or workshops, haven't really been focusing on the diversity part, but really about skills that we need just to interact with human beings and that have ramifications on diversity issues. And we've been spending a lot of time on just how to be a better listener. And I'll tell you the first time and I will be the first to admit, I thought I was an amazing listener. And I went through this training and I'm out halfway through and I'm like, not only am I not a good listener, I may be like one of the worst listeners, as I'm working through this. But really, and it's not just about listening for understanding, which is, important, but listening and what's not being said, looking at body language, using context and historical context to figure out, why is Karmen saying what she's saying, and pausing before I open my mouth to respond to think, well, Karmen may be saying that because of X, Y, and Z, or HaDisha may have done that because of what happened 2 weeks ago or whatnot. And just taking that pause and thinking about how do I be a better listener, helps us with all kinds of aspects of our work, but really around diversity issues too, and kind of take some of the anxiety around and some of the escalated tensions that can come with having these types of conversations, and really just kind of brings it back to, okay, I'm going to be a good person, I'm going to listen here, and also taking it from the point of assume good intentions. If somebody says something that's offensive or that rankles me in some way, assume that they weren't trying to do that. And how do I let them know that they've done it, but also try and figure out how we can move past that. And sometimes you do that in real time, sometimes you pull the person aside later, but really just giving grace to people. And I think that's been very helpful in a lot of our work that we're doing at AT&T.
HaDisha, I am a big proponent of women helping women. When I first started practicing law, women didn't really help women. They actually made it harder for women because they felt that we shouldn't get an extra chance, so we had to be, tougher. I'm hoping that the next generation, let's call it, that you're figuring out ways to bring other women along, and what techniques do you see that would be helpful for companies to do to ensure that that will be the message for women and for all diverse groups to be able to be included and be brought to the table? I know you gave the example of the colleges, but maybe you have some other suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mentorship is a big component and D&I efforts, and as well as with women, helping women. So a good example is we actually just hired a legal project specialist who's pretty much akin to being our paralegal. Her first job out of college. So she's young and she's learning and she's making a lot of mistakes along the way. But it's all good. We expected that when we hired her, and we, even though we knew it was a busy position and a busy job and she would have a heavy load to carry, but it was really about bringing her on because she was super excited to join and super, like you could tell she's very smart and creative, and she just needed someone to cultivate what we already saw was there. So we thought that Nancy and myself, we were the only two attorneys, the women who down the Northeast region at the time. We've had some men, unfortunately, join us since. No, fortunately, we had some men join us and balance us out there. But we took her on and took her in, and we've really been using it as an opportunity to mentor her. And I think mentorship is just important just across the boards, and to be mentored by people who don't look like you, but especially to be sometimes mentored by people who do look like you and have walked in some shoes that you intend to fill at some later points in your life. So we've been helping her out a lot with just training and teaching, and I think that was super important for me when I was a young attorney, just being comfortable in a room to ask the question that I didn't feel like someone was going to be like, you don't know that and you're an attorney. And, just so being comfortable in the room with saying, hey, how do I do this, or how would you do this, and just taking every moment and making it a teachable moment, especially when you're new into an industry or new into a career, new into a company, whatever it is. So, and one of the things DISH actually has launched is a legal mentorship program. So we actually are paired up with people all across the legal field. So we could be working with someone in litigation or someone in M&A and things like that. And we just talk, and it's a good opportunity for us to mix and mingle and learn different fields of law, but also to talk to people who are sometimes our peers or in positions higher than us, and just say, hey, what else do I need to know as I continue my role throughout this company?
Really terrific. I think, Marc, I know you have had a lot of experience at AT&T and you managed a lot of people. What do you find in your everyday practice is most helpful and something that you really make an effort to do, maybe on a daily basis, in order to promote diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think Karmen said it. It's just living it, right? And it's gotten me in trouble in my career, but being transparent, just being who I am, and letting my subordinates and my bosses and my peers see that. And I think a lot can be said when people see their boss acting a certain way. And I think that the lesson I've learned from some bad bosses in the past, frankly, is I'm going to live my true self and bring my whole self to work when I can. Sometimes you can't bring your whole self to work, and I'm not using foul language, which I can sometimes do in my true self, but knowing when to do that, but just living an example for others. And I think that's the strongest thing that I can do, and I think all of us can do.
Karmen, what have you seen in your years now at Crown as being something that you want to develop further, that you think would be helpful to women, and maybe in your approach as head of government affairs, as to how that would be helpful of dovetailing diversity and inclusion into the workplace?
Well, I think that the steps that we've taken in the hiring process have been quite good, but it's, as HaDisha mentioned, while you're here, then what happens, right? Do you stay? There needs to be a continued path for teammates to continue to promote and advance. And so, for me, that I do try to be open and transparent. I get the thing about the cursing also. But, to be, then, individual contributors will see that. And I've had people many who don't work within my team, who, frankly, I'd not met before. But Karmen, I saw your example. You sat on my panel So there was I am invited to sit on a number of interview panels, but for technical things, I don't know anything about that. This will be a manager who will manage the team on laying fiber. And why am I here? Well, Karmen, it is because you are looking for things beyond the technical. And it is that example of widening the panel. So, and we've had a couple of examples where I raised a few things and that changed the minds of the other panelists. Oh, you're right, maybe we want that. So you know, what more could you do? There are so many things. You do have to go within the speed of your company, but always push. I'm an envelope pusher. So continue to ask. Don't be, you know, have hurt feelings or think, gosh, you know, we're not going to keep going. No, keep trying. Maybe, you know, you can't do it this year, but bring it up next year. Because this will continue to be a process. And as we have younger workforce, our customers want it, but also our workforces want this. And again, it is the right thing to do. And as we start doing this more and more, and it becomes less awkward, it will become easier to accept. So we just need to keep going. One thing I would like to say, though, that is something that's simple and for consistency. So within Crown, one of our initiatives is we have made our, we've made all of our benefits gender neutral. So, you know, you may have had maternity leave. When I took it, it was maternity leave. Now it is just new child leave. And so that is so inclusive if you think about that for so many things. It is fathers, it is your natural children, it is adopted children, it is foster children, it is, when you take out the gender, it's just in that simple example, it includes so many groups, and and I've heard from people, you feel more welcome. That applies to me, it's not just for moms, yes, it applies to you. And within Crown, we have really expanded our benefits as well, so that it's far above what the federal requirement is, and it is paid 100% and not a deduction. So it's those sorts of things that are simple for consistency. As an example, take the gender out of it, and it makes it those benefits a lot more inclusive to others.
Well, I think that's wonderful to hear. I'm being told we have to wrap it up, so I'm just going to ask if there's any questions for our panelists before I give any final thoughts. Any questions out there? I don't see any. Well, you guys must have answered so many questions that no one even has a question. Or maybe they're afraid to answer a question, but I'm hoping in this panel, where everyone is being very forthright, that people would feel free to ask questions. I think, please.
So when you are working at such big organizations, you're doing such impactful work, how do you make sure that all of your workforce knows what you're doing and that everyone is on the same page? Because I think part of the challenge is really making sure that the information is really widely shared. So how do you go about doing that?
It's probably the biggest organization up here. That's hard. The question that you didn't hear was, how do you, in a big organization, how do you make sure that the work is being done, you know, across the entire organization, and how do you make sure that that gets repeated? I think, first of all, I would say you make sure your own house is in order. I have to make sure I'm doing what I need to do, and that my team is doing what they need to do. You know, and I think you have to be intentional, and I think that's the biggest thing I can say is this has to be intentional work. And if your company is really serious about it, then it needs to be intentional at all levels. And so I'll be honest with you, one of my biggest challenges is making sure that I'm constantly going to my boss and talking about what are we doing around this topic, and making sure that it's part of the discussion at meetings, making sure that it's when we're doing updates that this is included as part of the agenda, making sure that we're celebrating wins and milestones when we make them, acknowledging when we're falling short on areas and having real discussions about them, but just being intentional about it and making sure that everyone in the organization is being intentional about it as well.
No, Karmen, if you want to highlight anything in particular in closing, but I think what the question is really highlighting is that if you're doing it, how do you broadcast it so everyone in the company is going to be able to follow your example? And it seems like you're a wonderful example at Crown, so maybe you can highlight some of the things that you do to make sure that your initiatives are going beyond your team.
Yes. So within Crown, that as we have new initiatives, new policy updates that we do, you can do some administrative things that are simple, right? An email blast. We have this new policy. Here it is. There's a link to it. We do have, of course, our company internal website where it is prominently posted, where there are things that are new. You could have some training. We have, those sorts of mandatory things like California for harassment, that sort of thing. But I also really, it is on people leaders. There is a reason that you sit in that seat. And one of those is that to your house is in order that you are up to date on those. Because I do get questions, do we have a benefit for that? Yes, or no, we don't, and that's a great idea. But it is, I think, incumbent on people managers to understand what our benefits are, because those are, that is an added benefit to your workforce, and they deserve it. And so as people leaders, that we need to make sure that we understand what those are and that are reminding our teams that you have that and that you should use it.
HaDisha, in closing, is there anything you want people to be thinking about as they're moving on to the next topic, as to what has been really important in your experience and what you want to make sure that other young professionals will be able to get the benefit of?
Yeah, I think just really like these wonderful folks on the panel said earlier, is really just kind of living it and not making DE&I just an initiative in your company or just something that's important now so that you can maybe get certain contracts or certain funding, or although it is great for business. And as we enter into agreements specifically with municipalities and other governmental agencies, we do have to answer to questions of like, what's your affirmative action plan and what's your equal opportunity employment things and things of that nature. So it is great for business, but it also is just great for humanity. It's just great for people in general. Why wouldn't our companies, especially in the wireless industry, where the work that we do, our clientele is literally everyone, every person, every gender, every sexuality, every nationality. Why wouldn't our companies be reflective of the people that we're serving? So it's just great for humanity. So let's not make DE&I an initiative, a trigger word, as you said earlier, something we need to do or we should do so that our companies are compliant, but really make it a thing because we just want to be great people to each other across the globe. That's what my last and final thought.
That's wonderful, and I thank you all for being on the panel and for all your insight. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful initiative and thoughts, and really been so wonderful to be able to participate. So thank you.
Thank you.